Two strategies to move. One plane. Two strategies, expansion, compression. One plane, transverse.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand and it is perfect. All right, a very busy Tuesday. So we are just going to dig straight into today's Q&A. This is with Andrew. And Andrew has some questions about internal rotation and external rotation as it's represented in my model, because I look at internal and external rotation quite a bit differently than what would be traditionally represented. The thing we want to recognize is that everything that we do is based on our helical structure, and so therefore internal and external rotation have to follow suit. And so looking at these things in movement, especially in straight planes, can create a great deal of incoherence in regards to what we see as the representation. And so we went in depth on this. I think there was actually a really good question and turned into a really good conversation that I think is going to help a lot of people try to understand a little bit more about how we want to produce force, how we produce space and movement. So thank you, Andrew, for your question. If you'd like to participate in a 15-minute coaching consultation, please go to askbillhartman@gmail.com, askbillhartman@gmail.com. Put 15-minute consultation in the subject line so you don't delete it, and we will arrange that at our mutual convenience as usual. Everybody have an outstanding Tuesday, and I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, we are recording. The clock has started. Andrew, what is your question, young man?
So one of the more useful things about your way of thinking, in my estimation, is the idea that we're really only moving in one plane, and that when we say flexion, extension, adduction, abduction, we're really just describing what it looks like, rather than making an accurate statement about the motion of the body.
Correct.
So internal and external rotation, according to the textbook definition, is either towards, so internal, or away, external, from midline, right? And as far as I can tell, the way you use the terms is the same, except for you're just accounting for more of the axial skeletal sort of mechanics and dynamics, and not just focusing on what's happening at the appendicular skeleton. So it seems that you're using the term the same way, but you're just accounting for more variables. And so my first mini question is that correct, that you're still using towards and away from midline as the weight? No? Okay. There we go.
It'll look that way. It will look that way. Okay, so it's a little less painful than taking away the imaginary sagittal planes and frontal planes, right? Okay. So the one thing that you have to recognize is our human structure is all based on helical angles. So it's a spiral. Okay, we are just a series of spirals. If you go all the way down to the smallest collagen fiber, it is a spiral helical orientation. On the larger scale, you are a spiral helical orientation. Okay, so under those circumstances, there would be no front, back, side, side. Okay, there's only, which is why I only talk about one plane. And I can take that one away too if you really wanted to. I could take that one off the plate. Okay, but I won't do that because I know it's really painful. Okay, but the way that helices work is when they compress. Right, they turn inward on themselves, and so the spirals will overlap, and they will compress, and they will push down. They will result in a downward force. That's internal rotation. So internal rotation is down. Okay, external rotation then, by opposition, is as this spiral expands, it goes up, and so it moves away from Earth. So what we have is, if I'm turning inward, I'm going down. If I'm turning outward, I'm going up. So when we talk about propulsion, the way we move through space, we only go forward, right? So that's propulsion, okay? But we also have to apply forces into the ground. And then, so that's why the IR bias is always in existence through the propulsive phase of anything that we're doing, because we have to push down, because everything else is pushing up to meet us, right? That's what is it, Newton's third law, right?
Mm-hmm.
So equal and opposite. So that's the true definition for me for internal rotation is a force application downward, and then for the external rotation it is the expansion upward. So it's down compress, up expand.
Got it.
Okay.
Huge. And
well,
then,
I don't know if it's huge, but it's coherent. The goal is to make it coherent, right? So everything matches. It's like, so here's your structure. Here's how that structure behaves. What's the rule? And so that's how I'm looking at it.
yes. And could you expand just a little bit? That's not the right word, but because
It's kind of funny though, isn't it? When you say like
that. Yeah. Could we talk more about the way that internal rotation affects the helix and the way that external rotation affects the helix? Because I'm trying to visualize that. I know that collagen is like a three strand structure that kind of wraps together.
Real simple. Take a towel, a wet towel, and wring it out. Which way does it tighten as you twist it?
Yes.
Okay. So as it tightens, it compresses, and that's what squeezes the water out, right? So it's compressing the space. So the water has to go somewhere, can't stay in the towel, has to go outside the towel. Okay. That's internal rotation. So as you twist the towel tighter and tighter and tighter, there's greater and greater compression. Okay. And it's moving inward, right? Internal rotation. Okay. It's becoming denser. There's less space inside of it, more space outside of it. It becomes dense. It goes down. So if I take something that is very, very dense and I put it in a pool of water, it sinks because it is more dense than the surrounding fluid, right? Okay.
Yep.
If I take something that is less dense, okay, even if it weighs the same, if it takes something that's less dense and it has more surface area, it could potentially float, right? Okay, so if I unring the towel, now I am allowing space to go to be created within the towel itself, and that is the expansive, that is external rotation. Okay.
So that's where
sponge is another great example. So full sponge of water, I squeeze it out, right? I compress it, I squeeze the water out. The water has to go outside. But if I put the sponge underwater and I release it, it sucks it back in, right? So then it expands. Same rules.
So it seems like it's more of a, I mean, this isn't exact, but it's more like external rotation is just pulling my body inward, kind of exhale. No,
external rotation is expansion. It's
sorry, internal rotation. So it's more squeezing my body inward.
It is. It's
the
exactly
same way that, okay. And so any of the, any global representation of internal rotation would be squeezing things inward, and
that's why so two strategies to move, one plane, two strategies, expansion, compression, one plane, transverse.
Right.
Because it's all rotations. It's all rotations. So the thing that, and the reason that why I take away these other straight planes is because, for instance, say if I'm reaching straight forward, okay. If I reach forward and people say that, oh, you're moving in the imaginary sagittal plane. They say it's a straight plane. The only way that you move through that space is to create rotations, and then the resultant of my hand or arm being stable in a straight line is a production or cancellation of rotations that allows me to stay in that line. That's why that plane doesn't exist. There is no plane. Okay, we have those terms to have a conversation. Right? But the reality is not that those straight planes are there. The problem is that people are expressing these ideas as if those straight planes are reality.
Yeah.
And we are somehow fixed in them, because we talk about humans being three-dimensional or four. I would prefer four-dimensional because we got to get the time factors in there, right? The space-time, right? But point being is that we are never moving. We are never moving in a straight plane. So let's not talk about them. Let's actually speak a little bit closer to reality, which is everything is a turn. Everything has a compressive element or an expansive element to produce the resultant, right? And what we see is that resultant. And then if we need to give it a name to have a conversation, I'm okay with that. But let's not express ideas as if that's what's really happening, because that's what screws up the math when they try to calculate forces. That's what screws up interventions when people think that I got to push you into that straight line. And it's like, well, how did that person push themselves into that straight line? Did they ER or did they IR? And then people get all confused and they say, well, that's an IR position. It's like, no, it's not. You're using ER or IR to get there. And then we are concerned about how you did it, because under some circumstances, if you do it a certain way, it works really, really well. And if you do it another way, it hurts.
Yeah.
And then that's what we have to do. That's what we have to distinguish. So on my end, I get the people that they come to see me and they go, Bill, it hurts. And then they come to see you and they say, Andrew, I can't get into that position. And you say, here's how you're going to do it.
Right. And I think that it leads to a lot of misconceptions, just at a very broad level. When it comes to exercise. And to that point, for myself and for a lot of trainers and therapists out there, and I thought of this because of the Coffee and Coaches call this past week, where you were talking about the external rotation exercise, right? And how you can basically do an IR to get that to happen. You can create a squeeze to make that happen.
Yep.
Do you think that there are any particularly sort of bastardized examples where people are saying it's external rotation, but it's internal rotation, or vice versa?
Always.
Right.
Always.
Right.
Simple measurement. And this is one of those great examples because it's really easy for people to find. So anybody that's watching this or listening to this can actually do this. All you got to do is you go to Google, okay, and you put in the search bar, Olympic weightlifting snatch, and you look at a series of photos of people sitting in the deepest possible squat with the barbell up overhead. Okay. And then people will see the knees being positioned away from midline. And so right away, everybody says external rotation. But these people are producing force into the ground at a very high level. What you have is people that are orienting themselves into a position where they can access a space, which we would call, it's external rotation orientation, so they can produce force into the ground. Their hip joint, if we were to look at the hip joint, the relative position of the hip joint, it's internally rotated. Because it has to be pushing down into the ground. But because of the amount of compression that they have to use to hold a weight overhead in that position, there's no way that they have the normal capability to access external rotation, because you don't produce force in external rotation. You can capture a position in external rotation, you can demonstrate velocity in external rotation, but you don't produce force well in external rotation. It is limited. So I need high levels of internal rotation capabilities under those circumstances. And so again, it's like, this is one of those things that by rule, see, the rule was moving away from midline. You said it at the very beginning, moving away from midline, it's external rotation, moving towards is internal rotation. It's like we have to look at this differently, because it creates a massive amount of confusion because of what the reality is. The reality is that we got to push down, right, for our internal rotation to produce force.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and
so people mismeasure, but people mismeasure things. They go, oh, you have this much external rotation, when the reality is, but the position is actually internally rotated.
Right. Well, and even in the Olympic weightlifting example, it seems like if you look at the hip, it's squeezing inward, so it's more right. And there's a nutated sacrum, so that even seems like an example where it's just you have to look more proximally to see what's happening.
Right. Well, so hang on. You hit on something really important here. I apologize for interrupting, but you hit on something really important. Is we have to look at this systemically. We can't look at a piece and then make a decision. You have to look at the relationships between all of the pieces, right? So to speak, even though you're one big piece, right? Okay. But that's really important. And I'm so glad you actually said it out loud, because people are making decisions thinking that they're measuring one thing, and that's impossible.
Right. Right. So, and that would be probably the biggest mistake in examples where we're looking at what appears to be happening versus what is actually happening, is that we're looking too distally rather than looking at where is the rib cage, where is the pelvis.
They're looking through a very narrow lens, right? Okay, let me take you back, because I know you remember this. Remember when I made you stand up on one of the Coffee and Coaches conference calls, and we did a hip thingy where I had you turn the hip inward and outward, and you turned it far enough that you felt your spine start to turn too.
Yeah.
That's always happening. Just to what degree, right? So again, we have to start looking at this more systemically. We have to understand what the relationships are, rather than defaulting into this looks like this, the straight plane thing, right? And if it looks like this and I turn you this way, then I am measuring ER, IR, whatever it is. When the reality is like, you got to think about, how did you even get into that position? What movement took place that put you in that space? See the difference?
Yes, definitely.
Very cool. Do you have anything quick?
I think we'll just table it right there. It's a good time to cut it off.
I was going to say, we got about 20 seconds. So
yeah, it doesn't seem like we can get too deep with 20 seconds. So
no worries, man. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. I'll see you on IFSU and then on the coffee call. Okay.
Yes. Very helpful. Thank you.
All right, brother. Good to see you.
See you.